When billionaire Lachlan Pierce was found dead beside his mistress in a New York penthouse, the world saw a scandal. But behind the champagne, secrets, and shattered glass lay a conspiracy so dark it destroyed everyone who touched it. Lachlan Pierce had always been a man who thrived on control. Born in Perth to a modest family, he built his fortune from the ground up, first in mining and later in technology investments that turned him into one of Australia's youngest billionaires. By the time he turned 50, he had become a symbol of ambition and success. His public image was flawless, philanthropic, charming, and deeply admired. He was often seen at charity galas beside his elegant wife, Miriam, their smiles a portrait of perfection. Yet beneath the polished exterior, Lachlan felt an emptiness he could never quite define. His days were dictated by board meetings and financial negotiations, but his nights were haunted by a growing restlessness. The more he gained, the more he felt something vital was missing. When his company expanded internationally, he began spending long periods abroad, claiming to chase new opportunities. In truth, those trips became his escape from the suffocating expectations of wealth and marriage. New York City quickly became his second home, a place where no one demanded answers and where he could be anyone he wanted. There, among glittering skyscrapers and endless nights, Lachlan discovered a freedom he had not felt in years. But freedom came with temptation. Surrounded by art, luxury, and beautiful strangers, he found himself drawn to risks that once would have terrified him. Each decision pushed him a little further from the man he used to be. He began living two lives, one of power and respectability in Sydney, and another of secrecy and indulgence in Manhattan. Lachlan believed he could keep both worlds separate forever. What he didn't realize was that the cracks were already forming, and soon, those very secrets would pull him into the most dangerous chapter of his life. Valeria Cruz was unlike anyone Lachlan had ever met. She was 29, born in Madrid, and had built her reputation in New York's high-end art world through charm, intelligence, and calculated mystery. Her gallery catered to elite collectors, and her presence at every major art event made her both admired and envied. Lachlan first encountered her at a private exhibition hosted by one of his business partners. She stood out instantly, confident, elegant, and fearless in her approach. While others saw her as a social climber, Lachlan saw excitement, a spark that reignited something long dormant in him. Their connection was instant, magnetic, and dangerous. Within weeks, they began meeting secretly, first in hotels, then in the privacy of Valeria's luxurious apartment. Lachlan was captivated by her boldness and the way she made him feel young again, free from the constraints of his corporate life. Valeria, on the other hand, was intrigued by his wealth and the influence it carried. Their relationship was as much about desire as it was about power. When Lachlan offered to rent her a penthouse overlooking Central Park, she didn't refuse. The space became their hidden paradise, a world of champagne dinners, whispered promises, and lavish gifts. Yet beneath the glamour, their bond began to shift. Valeria wanted more money, more commitment, more control. Lachlan, torn between guilt and obsession, couldn't resist her growing demands. He told himself it was harmless, that no one would ever find out. But Valeria was not a woman who settled for secrecy forever. Behind her affectionate smiles, she was calculating her next move, sensing his vulnerability. What began as an affair built on excitement was slowly turning into a game of manipulation and deceit, one that neither of them could afford to lose. In Sydney, the whispers began quietly, carried through boardrooms and dinner parties where everyone smiled but no one trusted. Lachlan's sudden fascination with his U.S. expansion had raised questions. His assistant noticed frequent unplanned trips to New York, unexplained withdrawals from private accounts, and late-night calls that were always taken behind closed doors. Miriam Pierce, his wife of 20 years, sensed the distance long before the rumors reached her. She had built her life around maintaining appearances, and Lachlan's growing detachment threatened everything she valued. He had become distracted, careless even, forgetting important dates and skipping social functions that once mattered to him. The media began speculating about the billionaire's shifting priorities, hinting that his marriage might be unraveling. To protect her image, Miriam publicly dismissed the gossip, but privately, she began searching for answers. One of Lachlan's longtime business partners, Alan Devereux, had his own suspicions. Once close friends, the two men had grown apart after a series of tense financial disagreements. Alan felt betrayed when Lachlan excluded him from a lucrative investment deal overseas. When he heard about Lachlan's mysterious trips and hidden expenditures, he saw more than scandal. He saw opportunity. Without Lachlan's knowledge, Alan hired a private investigator to follow him, claiming it was to protect company interests. The investigator's findings were explosive. Photos of Lachlan entering the same Manhattan penthouse with a young woman, repeated transactions tied to foreign accounts, and discreet payments to New York staff. Alan kept the information to himself, waiting for the right moment to use it. Back in Sydney, Miriam received her own anonymous message, an envelope containing a single photograph of her husband with Valeria Cruz. That picture marked the beginning of the end, setting off a chain of events that would destroy them all. The night of the dinner was meant to mark a new beginning for Lachlan. After weeks of tension in his personal and business life, he wanted to celebrate a supposed victory, his upcoming announcement to move part of his company's operations to New York. He believed it would give him an excuse to stay closer to Valeria without drawing suspicion. The penthouse shimmered with soft light, the skyline of Manhattan glowing through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Valeria had arranged everything herself, from the imported wine to the delicate orchids placed around the room. The guest list was small but carefully chosen. Two of her art world associates, one American investor, and a visiting Australian executive who admired Lachlan's success. Everyone arrived dressed for luxury, unaware that the night would end in tragedy. As laughter filled the space, Valeria moved gracefully among the guests, pouring drinks and exchanging glances with Lachlan that carried a mix of passion and unease. He tried to appear relaxed, but something in his eyes betrayed exhaustion. He had been receiving cryptic messages from an unknown number, warning him to end it before it ends you. Valeria noticed his uneasiness, but dismissed it as business stress. After dinner, when the guests left, the penthouse fell into silence. The city lights flickered against the glass as Lachlan poured one last drink for both of them. The two stood together at the window, pretending everything was perfect. Neither knew that someone else had already been inside the penthouse earlier that evening, tampering with what they believed to be a simple bottle of champagne. Hours later, neighbors reported hearing a crash, followed by silence. By morning, that same penthouse, once a place of forbidden romance and luxury, had become the scene of a gruesome double death. When the housekeeper arrived that morning, she expected to find the usual signs of indulgence: a few glasses left out, the faint scent of expensive perfume, and maybe an unmade bed. Instead, what greeted her was a nightmare. Lachlan Pierce lay motionless on the marble floor near the living area, his once carefully styled hair darkened with blood. Valeria Cruz was nearby, her body collapsed beside an overturned chair, her eyes open but lifeless. The penthouse looked like chaos had swept through it. A table had been knocked over, a shattered champagne bottle glittered under the morning light, and a trail of spilled wine mixed with something darker across the floor. The housekeeper, trembling, dropped her cleaning supplies and called emergency services, her voice shaking as she struggled to describe what she was seeing. Within minutes, the building was surrounded by police cars, flashing lights painting the glass walls red and blue. Detectives arrived quickly, sealing off the apartment as forensic teams began documenting the scene. Reporters soon gathered outside, shouting questions, their words echoing through the quiet morning. News spread instantly across continents. An Australian billionaire found dead in his luxury New York residence alongside a young woman rumored to be his mistress. Theories erupted online within hours, from jealous lovers to business rivals seeking revenge. Investigators were puzzled by the details. There were signs of struggle, but no forced entry. Valeria's jewelry was missing, yet her purse and phone remained untouched. The timeline was unclear, and security footage offered few answers. The penthouse, once filled with laughter and champagne, had become a puzzle of contradictions. As detectives surveyed the scene, one of them noticed a faint fingerprint smudged on the neck of the shattered bottle, one that didn't match either victim. It was the first clue to a far deeper mystery. Detectives began piecing together the final hours of Lachlan and Valeria's lives, determined to uncover what really happened inside that glittering penthouse. At first glance, it appeared to be a robbery gone wrong. Valuables were missing, drawers were open, and the balcony door had been forced. But as investigators reviewed building security footage, inconsistencies began to surface. No one had entered or exited the penthouse between midnight and dawn. The building's cameras showed only Lachlan, Valeria, and a few staff members earlier that evening. The supposed break-in had been staged. Detectives shifted focus toward the people closest to Lachlan, combing through his business records, phone logs, and private emails. They discovered several encrypted messages sent from his personal account in the days before his death, all hinting at fear and suspicion. He had written that someone was following him, someone who knew too much. Toxicology reports soon revealed traces of an unusual substance in both victims' systems, an imported toxin rarely found in the United States. It pointed toward a premeditated act, not a crime of passion. The investigation expanded beyond New York, reaching Sydney, where authorities began questioning Lachlan's associates. Miriam Pierce, his wife, remained composed in her public appearances but refused to answer questions about her husband's financial dealings. Meanwhile, forensic analysts discovered that several surveillance files from the Penthouse's private security system had been deleted just hours before the deaths. The deletion required access to a master code known only to a few people. Detectives realized this was not an impulsive act of jealousy or theft. It was a coordinated effort carried out with precision. Somewhere in Lachlan's circle, either in his personal life or his business empire, someone had orchestrated the perfect setup, confident that the truth would remain buried beneath wealth and secrecy. When Miriam Pierce landed in New York, she was greeted by flashing cameras and shouted questions from journalists eager for her reaction. She appeared calm, dressed impeccably in black, her expression unreadable. Publicly, she played the role of the grieving widow with practiced grace, telling reporters she was heartbroken by a devastating tragedy. Privately, detectives found her detached and unwilling to cooperate. She refused to discuss her husband's recent trips or explain why she had transferred several $1,000,000 into an offshore account only weeks before his death. When pressed, she claimed it was for tax restructuring. Behind the scenes, however, Miriam was far from indifferent. In Sydney, she had endured years of rumors about her husband's affairs, each one more humiliating than the last. She had tolerated his absences and his secrets because leaving him would mean surrendering her power, her influence, and the empire she had helped him build. But the discovery of his affair with Valeria Cruz had shattered whatever remained of her composure. The leaked photograph of Lachlan and the young art dealer had circulated among Sydney's elite before the murder, leaving Miriam humiliated in the very circles she once ruled. Investigators soon learned she had hired a private attorney known for handling delicate domestic matters. Financial records showed multiple communications between the attorney and a security consultant who had traveled to New York just days before the killings. Yet, without direct evidence, nothing tied Miriam to the crime. She returned to her hotel each night under police protection, maintaining the appearance of a widow caught in tragedy. But those who knew her well whispered that Miriam's silence was not grief, it was calculation. She was waiting, not for justice, but for the right moment to ensure her husband's secrets died with him. The toxicology results changed everything. Both Lachlan and Valeria had ingested a rare poison, one derived from a plant that could only be legally purchased by licensed laboratories. The discovery shifted the investigation from a violent struggle to something far more deliberate. Detectives combed through the penthouse, searching for any clue that could explain how the poison was administered. In the bar area, they found an expensive crystal decanter containing the remnants of a golden liquid, champagne mixed with traces of the same toxin found in the victim's bloodstreams. Fingerprints on the decanter and glasses pointed overwhelmingly to Valeria Cruz. It seemed to suggest she had poisoned Lachlan during their celebration and then taken her own life out of guilt. For a brief moment, investigators believed they had their answer. But as they delved deeper, inconsistencies began to surface. The concentration of poison in Lachlan's body was nearly 3 times higher than in Valeria's, indicating the drinks had been altered after they were poured. There were no signs of hesitation or struggle from Valeria, suggesting she might not have known what was happening at all. The champagne bottle itself carried another mystery. It had been opened before that night. Traces of gloves were found on its neck, implying someone had tampered with it in advance. Surveillance footage revealed a delivery to the Penthouse 2 days earlier from an unknown courier service that Valeria never ordered. Detectives began to piece together a darker theory. Valeria had been used, a pawn in a scheme designed to look like a lover's tragedy. Someone had orchestrated every detail, the poison, the setting, the timing, ensuring that suspicion would fall on her. What had first appeared to be passion turned fatal now pointed unmistakably toward careful and cold-blooded planning. As investigators traced the origin of the poison, their search led them across international borders. Records showed the toxin had been purchased through a shell company registered in Singapore under the guise of a chemical import business. The transaction was routed through multiple offshore accounts, each designed to conceal the buyer's identity. After weeks of analysis, financial experts uncovered a crucial connection. The shell company was linked to Alan Devereux, Lachlan Pierce's former business partner. Alan had once been Lachlan's closest confidant, co-founder of their first venture, and best man at his wedding. But after a bitter corporate fallout, Alan had been forced out of their company, losing millions in shares and reputation. He vanished from public view soon after, quietly relocating overseas. Investigators discovered that Alan had been in New York around the time of the murder, checking into a nearby hotel under a false name. Security footage from a private service elevator showed a man matching his description entering the building's maintenance level hours before the killings. Detectives also uncovered digital payments made from one of Alan's accounts to a member of the Penthouse staff, an unusually large amount labeled as a consultation fee. It was enough to raise suspicion that someone on the inside had helped him gain access. As police reconstructed the timeline, the pieces began to align. Alan had both motive and means. Revenge, greed, and resentment had merged into a single act of vengeance. But one thing didn't fit. Why was Valeria targeted too? Further investigation revealed she had recently approached Alan through an intermediary, seeking funding for her art gallery. It suggested she may have unknowingly walked into his plan. What had begun as a private betrayal between two former partners was now exposed as a meticulously orchestrated murder plot spanning continents. Just as authorities prepared to issue an international warrant for Alan Devereux, a new discovery emerged that reframed the entire case. Forensic technicians recovered encrypted files from the Penthouse's deleted surveillance system, fragments of recordings thought to be lost forever. One recovered clip showed Miriam Pierce meeting with Alan in a discreet Manhattan cafe 2 weeks before the murders. The footage captured them exchanging documents and speaking intensely, their expressions cold and deliberate. Investigators realized Miriam and Alan had been working together long before Lachlan's death. Their shared goal was to dismantle Lachlan's empire, seize his offshore assets, and erase him from the picture completely. Alan had handled the technical side, manipulating finances, securing the poison, and arranging access to the Penthouse. Miriam, using her influence, had ensured Lachlan would be in New York that week and isolated from his closest advisors. However, the plan had fractured in the final stages. Alan, consumed by resentment, decided to eliminate Valeria as well, fearing she might expose the affair before the takeover was complete. When Miriam learned of his decision, she panicked and cut contact, not realizing Alan would proceed anyway. In a twisted turn of fate, her attempt to protect herself only sealed her husband's fate. Once the footage was made public, Miriam's composure collapsed. Alan was later found dead in a rented apartment in London, an apparent suicide, leaving behind a letter filled with blame and regret. Miriam was never formally charged, citing lack of evidence, but her reputation disintegrated overnight. Lachlan's empire was dismantled, his fortune frozen, and the story dominated global headlines. In the end, the truth revealed no simple motive, only a web of betrayal, greed, and vengeance. The luxury penthouse remained vacant, a haunting reminder that even the richest lives can collapse under their own secrets.